All right, good afternoon. I'm Aaron Heiser, Makers Leather Supply, and today we're going to finish the classy Fringe purse. Okay, so this is the purse we're talking about right here. It's very classy. So today we've got all of our parts ready to assemble. All right, we did two prior videos. We did one on tooling it. Okay, pull that up. We did one where we tooled that piece right there. We did one where we installed the clasps on the pieces that needed to be installed, and we cut out all this crazy fringe. All right, and now it's time to put it all together. Okay, so I only did one thing, one sequence of events, I guess you could say, in between the last video and this video, and that is that I lined these pieces. Okay, I said before that you need to at least line the area behind here. You can take just a nice square or oval patch or something, but you want to cover up the backside of where that is because it's got sharpie pokey parts and you don't want people to scrape their hand on that every time they open or close their new bag. All right, but that's kind of the craftsman way to do it, is just to cover that, as opposed to the professional way to do it would just be, let's cover the entire thing with another piece of leather, and then I did all my edges. Okay, so I burnished my edges on the top and around the inside of the handle and the bottom of each of these pieces, and then also I burnished my edges on that piece right there and these two pieces right here. So that is all I did in the absence of the video. Oh, and well, when I lined it, I also needed to sew around the handle and over the top to sew that liner on. I did not sew it along the bottom or the edges because those are going to be parts of other seams later on. So that's why. All right. So without further ado, the next thing we're going to do is these little pieces right here are going to go on these pieces. But the easiest way to get them on there is to mark them and punch our holes for it now and then sew it later. I know that sounds confusing, and it is a little bit, but I'll show you what we mean in just a minute. So without further ado, let's get building this purse. All right, so how this works is after the purse is sewn together, these top yokes need to be sewn together, okay? And they need a very stable piece like this veg tan here to hold them together, all right? Now, this veg tan is gonna also hold the shoulder D-loop, D-ring. So when it's all said and done, it'll be like that, okay? Problem is getting that under a sewing machine on one side, easy peasy. Once you get over to the other side and now it's a full circle of the top yoke, not easy peasy. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up here. I'm going to mark my stitching lines. I'm even going to create my stitching holes. Then I'm going to disassemble this part. I'm not going to actually sew it together yet because it'll be the last thing that we do after the rest of the purse is put together, okay? If I tried to make this purse inside out with these already sewn together and then turn it right side out, I would have one heck of a good time on my hands trying to get it to turn. Not to mention then your leather, this purse, how it's designed, the top of it needs to be rigid. And once you've bent the leathers and everything trying to turn them right side out, then this isn't going to be rigid anymore. It'll be kind of soft, and it'll be prone to continue always to bend over and whatever. So here's how we're going to do this, okay? These straps are 1 inch wide, all right? And it wraps around the inside as well, and I need to mark where the inside will be just right behind the front side here so that everything lines up when I go to punch stitching holes and things like that. So if that's 1 inch wide, then I need to take my wing dividers here and I'm going to put them at about 1/2 inch. So I got a ruler over here off camera, and I'm going to put those at 1/2 inch. There we go. And then I'm just going to mark my leather at that 1/2 inch increment. Okay? Then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do the same thing. That way I can line the back side of it up too. And then I need to do the same thing on the opposite sides. So I'm just scribing lines so I know where to line all this up. There we go. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take an ink pen and I'm going to set up, when I set up one of these on one side, I want to number it to correlate with that side so that all the holes will line back up when I go to put them back together later. All right, if I punch the holes all willy-nilly for one side and then all willy-nilly for the other side, and then these ended up getting exchanged, then we're going to have a serious problem on our hands trying to line up those holes and hand sew this later. So it's best to just keep it squared away and keep it to where they're always on the same side, all right? But first, I just want to check those lines and make sure that when I line the edges of this piece up with my scribed lines, that it's pretty much, you know, that my piece is going to be right over the center of that seam there, okay? Now, the other thing, let me bring up my finished purse to show you. This one, in this video, we're going to hand sew this, but on this one, I did what's called a double diamond braid, and I used one of Don Gonzalez's videos to do it, okay? So, if you don't want to hand sew this, and you prefer to do this right here with some leather lace, stop what you're doing right now and watch his video on the double diamond video. That's DG Saddlery on right here on YouTube, or Don Gonzalez, anyway, his channel. But it's called the double diamond braid. This is the braid that he uses to like hold saddle skirts together in the back. Okay, so you're not going to want to do what I'm doing to hand sew it if you want to do what he did, or do what I did on this one and do the double diamond braid. Okay. Two different ways to do it. That way you'll still do the same thing and set it up, but you'll punch holes instead of hand stitching holes, of course. Okay, so there we go. All right, and then the other thing is, when I'm done with this, if you notice, my piece extends down below these two yokes just a little bit. I do that for a couple of reasons. One, it kind of looks pretty classy once it's all put together, and the name of this thing is the Classy Fringe Purse, right? But also, there's going to be kind of an ugly seam where the soft leather meets the hard leather right here once the whole bag is put together, and that covers up the very top edge of that seam, and no one will ever see it. And that's a good thing, right? So I leave it to where it's hanging off a little bit. Imagine, if you will, that where this thing starts to curve on the ends, if there was a straight line right across there, that's what I have at the bottom of my yoke pieces, is that straight line. So the tip of it is probably 3/8 of an inch or so beyond. Okay? Now, the other thing is, this one has to have this D-ring on it. Okay, so if I put my D-ring on here, I need to make sure that when I fold this piece over, that I leave enough room for that D-ring to be where it can move, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of double-sided tape and put down this seam so that we can temporarily hold everything together, because once I get it lined up, I sure as heck don't want it to continue moving on me too much, okay? You can use a piece of masking tape or whatever, but if I use this double-sided tape, I can take the backing off of it and I can stick this to it as well. And that's why I'm using the double-sided tape. Okay, make sure I follow my lines as I stick this to it. And then I'm going to carefully fold it or flip it over. Put another piece of tape right there, but if you notice, this doesn't go all the way down, okay? Because again, that soft leather comes up to about here, and that interior seam where it's a turned bag is going to stick out, and this wouldn't be able to cover it anyway. So it just kind of butts up against right up close to the top of it, okay? So I'll take another small piece of tape so that I can stick the back side of this down, but I again want to make sure that my D-ring is on there and that it leaves enough room for the D-ring to move a little bit. You don't want it just stuck up against the top of the bag, but you also don't want it just flopping everywhere. So just kind of where you can still rotate the D-ring, okay? There we go. And again, if these are in their lines and those are done in their lines, then we should be fine to punch holes, stitching holes through these, okay? So, I'm going to take my wing dividers and mark me a stitch line. And even though that interior piece only goes down to about here, I need to punch my stitch holes all the way down to about the bottom of the yoke. And that way everything lines up nicely. So draw me a couple of lines here so I can get them all nice and straight. And this is one of those things that I could have easily just put all the stitch holes and stuff as part of the pattern, but I like to teach people how to do this. How do we come up with where those stitch lines go and stuff like that. And it helps you with your next project. Maybe you'll want to design your own, and maybe it'll be like, oh yeah, I remember how we did it on that one bag. We can do that again. So, you know, my mission in life is to try to help others help themselves, I guess. All right, so I'm going to take my chisels here, and I'm going to go all the way through all those layers. This is a 7 stitches per inch chisel, okay? And I'm realizing right this very minute that I did not do exactly what I said I was going to do, and I did not label this piece or these two pieces to make sure that when this is all said and done, the right one ends up on the right side. But that's fine. I'll take care of that in just a moment. All right, so there's one side right there. Then I need to come over and punch those holes in the opposite side over here. The first one of these I made, my prototype one, was blue and red, and it was very pretty, but I did not pre-do any of this. Didn't pre-punch it, didn't nothing. And man, did I regret it. It was very difficult to get good stitching holes through all those layers when this thing was standing up and it was round, and that the roundness of it was just fighting me the entire time. So, we're smarter now. We've learned a new trick. And then the other thing too is when we do this later, we are actually going to take some thread or something and tie these two panels together before we stick this back on it, and that'll help hold everything together too. That was the other part I couldn't get right, was everything kept moving and I just couldn't keep it together. Story of my life. I just can't keep it together, all right? Anyway, so we've punched all those holes, so I'm going to remove that now. And I'm going to label it, okay? This is going to be side number 1, so I'll just put a 1 here, and then within the seam here, I'll put a 1 here and here, okay? And then I've just got to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. All the exact same everything, okay? I take the other one of these, I lined it up where I wanted, I double side tape everything together, I do my holes, and then I label this one number 2. 2, 2. And again, my labels are underneath the seam. Okay? So I'm going to get all that done, and when I come back, we'll do what's next. All right. So when I put out the video for this, that introduced this project box and this new pattern, I promised that it would be lined. Okay? The main body of the bag is lined. Again, this is optionally lined. It doesn't have to be. I did it. I recommend other people do it, but it doesn't have to be at all. But a lot of people want to know about lining a fabric bag, and so, or lining a bag with fabric, I should say. So that's what I'm going to show you on how I lined this one. Okay? First and foremost, you're going to have to find yourself some of this. Okay? I call it binding tape, but it's called bias tape. You can get it at any craft store that sells any kind of sewing supplies. This exact one actually came from Walmart, and it's 3 yards long and a 1/2 inch wide, okay? And we're gonna use that later to, it'll cover the edges of the fabric so you don't have a bunch of frayed edges inside your bag, okay? We won't need it until much later. I just want people to know right now that they will want to have that, and so that, you know, maybe they can go get it. All right, now, here is the fabric that I chose to line my bag with, okay? It's kind of a paisley print. I got it at Joann's probably. I've had it in my little collection of stuff for a long time. I just figure it's a nice complementing color for all the colors that we're using in this bag. All right, so the first thing I need to do is cut out 2 panels that are a little bit larger than this. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that so that I can get this giant spool, or what do they call this, a bolt, out of my way, and I don't have to worry about keeping it up here on the desk. Okay, so I'll just take my pieces here, put them on top there like that, and then I will rough cut. This is folded in half, so when I cut out one, I'm cutting out 2. And make me a nice little jagged cut that I'm sure I'll kick myself for later, but there we go. Now I can get that big old bolt out of the way. So, when I cut out the final cloth, the bottom of the bag is this skive side. The top of the bag is this non-skive side. When I cut out the final piece of fabric, I want to leave at least a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of overlap past the top end of the bag. And you'll see why in a moment, but for now, just know that that's the plan, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and kind of slide this to the side and further cut this down to size, because I'll use this other piece for the bottom of the purse so that everything has a liner. We are equal opportunity liners here. We will line it all. All right, now, more double-sided tape fun. Let me grab a 1/4 inch roll here. You can glue it on here if you want. You can use like a spray glue or something like that, but I'm just gonna cheat and use double-sided tape. I'm just gonna put it in my skives basically, and then one across the top. Okay, so I did the 3 skive sides. Now I'm going to do one across the top, and then I'm going to really throw you for a loop. And again, this is how I line this particular bag. This one's kind of easy because of how we can do the top, which is what I'm about to show you. Okay, we'll flip it over, and I'm going to put another piece of tape right along that top piece right there. A lot of the time, lining bags is most difficult because of what you do to the top to wrap your lining in with your zipper or whatever it is you need to do. On the sides and all that, it can be sewn in with that basting tape like I just showed you. But lining the top part of the bag is usually the most difficult. And on this bag, it's about to be super simple. So, let me get rid of one of these 2 pieces of fabric here. There we go. All right, so this is going to be unfinished side to unfinished side, right? So what's called the flesh side of my leather to the back side of the fabric. I want to leave at least a 3/4 inch gap, or 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch gap on the very top there. And then I just want to make sure that all the other sides are going to be covered as well. And what I'll do is I'll just keep this simple, and I'll stick it one side at a time. Okay, top's good. That side's good now. That side's good now. And the last side's down here. There we go. And then I'll stick it too. Okay, and you can turn it over if you want to or need to, and just make sure you didn't get any giant wrinkles into it or anything. This is going to be a loose liner for me because I didn't glue it to the fabric. All right, so there's no rhyme or reason as to why, other than I hate spray glue because it's messy, and there are plenty of times I do use it, but if I don't have to, I try not to. I need to grab a rotary cutter, and I don't have one sitting right here, so I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Had to find my rotary cutter. I was using it in another room yesterday. All right, so I'm going to take this and turn it, and I'm just going to cut that down to, Buddy wants to say hi. Hi, Buddy. Stay down. I'm going to cut that down to that 3/4 of an inch we talked about. I don't think this is the good rotary cutter, unfortunately. There we go. I'll have to try to find my one that's got a better blade on it. All right, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll it over that edge and stick it down with that double-sided tape there. Okay, and honestly, 3/4 might be a little bit long. I may trim that down to half. Or you know what? We'll split the difference and call it 3/8 or 5/8. And go through all the fun of recutting it because my blade stinks. Problem is, a messed up rotary blade is fine for leather, but not necessarily for fabric. Okay, got that done. All right, so I'm going to take the backing off the tape here at some point. There we go. And I'm going to fold that down over it. Ain't it cool? There we go. All right, now I need to cut out the rest of this so that my lining is the same as my leather. Cut everything twice since my blade's got janky spots on it. This is why I always tell people, close your knife when you're not using it. If you leave it open, you'll nick up your blade with it bouncing around on your tool bench with other tools. And the same goes for your other bladed tools. If you cover them up, it's not necessarily as much about, to me at least, it's not as much about safety and not accidentally cutting yourself with an open blade as it is protect the blade, and you won't have to sharpen it or replace it as often. All right. There we go. Now, why did we do it this way, Aaron? You're about to see. So, we're going to take our double-sided tape. We're going to place another layer of double-sided tape, as soon as I find the end of the roll, right across the top of there. And it'll almost go all the way out to the ends. It's going to stop a little bit short. And that just needs to be somewhere on that, that fabric. Now, guess what that does? That gives our fringe something to stick to. Okay, so by doing this, and then that sews on top of that. So by doing it this way, we have eliminated a problem, which is our top of our liner being exposed. It's folded down now, and it'll be underneath this seam right here. And then also we've, given everything a way to stick together so that we can do our assembly on this thing. So here we go. I'm going to take the backing off that tape, and I'm going to take my fringe, and I'm going to carefully line it up and center it as well. The fringe, remember we cut it down a little bit, is not as wide as the panel, so we do need to try to center it a little bit. And then I just put it on there even with the top of the panel piece. Check it out. Almost like it was meant to be there, isn't it? Now, we're going to do all this twice. The other panel needs the exact same treatment. Every bit of what we've done has to be done a second time. But again, I've said it before, instead of me making you watch me do it twice, you can always rewind the video if you need a reminder of what we've done. Okay? But we're going to continue on with what we are doing right here. And then, yeah, that way, once I pause the camera to catch up my second side and everything, when I turn it all back on, I'll be over there at the sewing machine. Okay. Now, the back of our yokes, notice that's a scalloped edge. I need to make sure that it is secure down against this far enough that, you know, the high points and low points of the scallops will be sewn to solid pieces of leather. All right, we don't want it so low that the high points won't catch the back piece there, and then we have a really messed up stitch. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler. I'm going to measure down. Let's do the same 5/8 of an inch. Okay, we did 5/8 on that other. It's a lucky number for us today. As soon as I figure out where 5/8 is on all the scallops. There we go. All right, and then I'm going to take a scratch awl and just scribe me a little line there. Just like that. Now that sews to, or that's going to stick to the, you see the line there? So we can take a piece of tape and put on either the back of this or the front of this and stick those together. And honestly, I prefer to put it on the back of this so that I can make sure it's high enough that it won't accidentally be inside of one of those scallops once it's sewn, or once it's stuck together, just because I don't want to see the tape on the finished product, of course. Okay, we talk about that in all our videos. Shiny and sticky means not made in our nice handmade workshop. Okay, so it's going to be, whoops, sorry, I'll have to turn this over, and then I'll slide it up from the bottom of the bench because all that fringe is in the way. I'll try to get the backing off this tape without pulling the tape off the daggum thing. Where's my awl? There we go. Okay. And then I'm just going to take and stick this on there, even with that line that we drew, and also centered right to left, because this is also not as wide as the yoke. Or sorry, the yoke is not as wide as the panel. That's how I meant to say that. There we go. Now, I don't want to forget this, but we're also, when we go over to the sewing machine, we're going to sew this onto this back side. And we're just going to center it right to left and make sure that it is pointing perfectly straight out from the purse. And we're just going to sew it around the edge right there. And that's about the right placement for it. It's about 1 5/8 of an inch into the handle. And again, I'll just sew it from about here to here, down and around the bottom there. And yeah, matter of fact, let me tape that on there, and that way I won't forget to sew it on there in a minute. The second one of these that I made, I did forget that part. And I almost forgot it again today, as you can see. It might be smarter to do that before we did what we just did here, but we've already done what we did here, so hopefully for you kids watching at home, it's really funny. When I made the second iteration of this bag, which is the one I showed on camera a while ago, I actually made way more mistakes on it than I did on the first bag. So, kind of interesting how that works out sometimes. There we go. All right, and then once again, I'm going to do every bit of that again to the other side. So when I come back, I'm also going to do the fabric to that bottom piece as well, in the exact same manner. I'm going to put tape around the outside edge, and then I'm just going to trim the lining along with the outside edge, okay? So when I get back, when we come back, we'll be at the sewing machine, and all of that will be done. All right, folks, so again, we got everything mocked up and ready. First thing I need to sew is that bottom line right there, to sew these two panels together. And then I'll sew this little thing right here. Okay, and the reason I'm going to sew this one first is because this is a kind of a waxy leather and the tape doesn't really hold it too well together. So if I go ahead and secure that, then I can come back and sew this and not worry about my bottom panel moving out of position when I do. Okay, so I'm just going to take and you know, like everything else and every other video I've done, this can be hand sewn. It's not a hard thing to do. It does take longer, but it can be hand sewn. All right, so I'm going to take, and now the problem when you're sewing things with fringe is you want to always make sure that all that fringe is out of your way. You don't want to accidentally sew the fringe to something, you know, when it's flopped over and gets into your seam and stuff like that. So you just got to be careful of that. And I'm going to take and I'm going to put my presser foot right here on the edge of my scalloped cut. Start out with a couple of back stitches. And go for it. Okay, this is a Cobra Class 18 sewing machine. I'm using a size 138 thread with a size 20 or maybe a 22 needle. Usually I use size 20s, but I had a class going on in here this weekend, and I usually put 22s in it for class just to make sure that there's no complications. But generally I like to use as small of a needle as I can get away with on my personal projects. But that is one size down. A 20 is just a little bit smaller than what's recommended for 138 thread. So it takes a little bit more finesse, and you got to be careful which seams you're sewing like that. If you get into thicker leather, you gotta move it up to that 22. All right, so I want to make sure that when I'm sewing that my needle point follows the scallops really well. So like when I get down to one of these points, I want to make sure that, you know, the needle's where it needs to be. Now I used really tiny stitches on this just for the fun of it, and so that I've got, even on this line, I've got these stitches really small. When I move to the side seams and everything, I'll back those stitches out, but I wanted this to match what I've already done, so they're pretty small right now. There we go. Just a stitching along, and again, I'll do this on the other one too, but I'm not gonna do it on camera because, well, when we do it to one panel, we gotta do it to both, right? Let me speed this up a little bit. I'm going way too slow. Yeah. I apologize for this video being kind of late. We've had quite the series of events around here. We're prepping for Sheridan. We leave for Sheridan in like 4 days. So that takes a lot of time, of course, to get all that prepped up and get the trailers loaded. We had a massive flood the other day. This classroom had quite a bit of water in it. And our front yard basically looked like a river. As a matter of fact, my good friend Justin had to bring a skidster out to my house and get my trailer out of the field for me, the trailer that we take to Sheridan, because it was in pretty much a marshland. The empty trailer left 9-inch ruts in the yard when we pulled it out, and so that tells you how wet everything was and why we couldn't use a truck to get that sucker out. All right, so that is done. Reach over there and grab me some nippers. There we go. I'm being very careful to cut the backside because, again, that's fabric back there, and I don't want to cut that fabric and cause fraying. Sorry, down there. So anyway, and then if you look, I don't know how well it'll show it, but my stitches are light colored. But as you can see, it's easily on the main body of the purse panel, so I didn't accidentally sew off of it while I was doing those scallops and everything, and then that holds in that top row of the lining really, really well. Okay, so now that I've stitched that down, I'm going to stitch my my clasp on there pretty well. Okay, and again, I'm going to use these teeny tiny little stitches that I'm doing so everything matches. We'll start out with a couple of back stitches. And then run it forward. Again, I have to be very cognizant. Every sew line I do, I have to be very, very sure of where all my fringe is lying, because if it flops over and gets in the way, or it's up underneath or anything like that, I could sew it right into something and not even realize it, and that's gonna definitely screw things up for me. All right, going back up the other side here. I want to make sure that my stitching on both sides is pretty even. So I think I need to do one more stitch here and reverse. Okay. All right, now I'm going to sew that bottom line on the other panel as well. And then when we come back, I'm going to have the two panels clipped together where the fringe faces each other. Okay, so they'll be clipped together like this, where the fringe faces each other, and we're going to do the side seams of the bag then. Okay, so we'll be back in just a moment. All right, so I started to clip this thing together, and I thought, well, maybe I should do it on video. And so this is not the most convenient. Matter of fact, I'm going to move that back a little bit. Bring it up a little bit. Okay, so the biggest thing is, once again, I've already said it a couple of times, but you got to make sure all that fringe is pushed back out of your seam when you're clipping this together. Okay, and then the most important part is the top yokes. Making sure they are perfectly stacked on top of each other. And then you just put your clips down your side of your bag. Okay, and then I'll even put one or two down along the bottom edge. All right, and if there's a little bit of fudge factor, let's say, you know, if the top yolks are put together squarely and one bottom end is, you know, 1/8 of an inch longer than the other, that's okay. You don't want that up at the top where the top yolks are. You want that down at the bottom where there's plenty of fudge factor and being able to sew it together, okay? And I'm just gonna throw one clip down here in the middle of the bottom just to hold everything together. All right, get the rest of these clips out of my way. Now we're just gonna sew down these side seams. Now, if you notice, right here, it's really thick, okay? And you're not able to sew it together right there. And honestly, that's okay. Remember earlier when we talked about that little end piece kind of overhanging that part and that being a little bit ugly? There's the ugly right there. Found it. All right. So anyway, it's no big deal. Start as high up as you can. If you're hand sewing, you can do it because you can squeeze them two pieces together. On a machine, however, so just start up as high as you can and sew down the rest of that side seam, okay? I'm actually going to do it from the bottom up. I think that'll be a little bit easier and help me get all the way as close to that top as I can, all right? So here we go. I'm gonna take that clip off, make sure all those sides are lined up. I'm gonna increase my stitch length because like I said, I had some teeny tiny stitches going on that top part. And I don't need them that tiny in this seam for sure. Okay. And I'm using my skive as my seam allowance, all right? So I'm about halfway down the side of that skive. And yeah, and I'm just gonna stitch those two sides together. It's no big deal. Whoop. Other clips hanging on my machine there as I go up. Okay, and again, I'm gonna make sure that my fringe is not in my seam. You don't want that. I'm going to sew up here until I can get as high as I can on it, and then I'm going to do my back stitching. On a class 26 or a cylinder arm machine, you'll actually even be able to get a little bit higher. Sorry, after I moved the camera, I didn't move it back. But you get the gist of what I did there. Anyway, on a cylinder machine, you can actually sew pretty close to that very edge because you can let this kind of hang off the side of the machine. Now, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but first, I'm going to put that basting tape on here, okay? Now, ordinarily, I would sew up both sides and then do the basting tape, but since we're doing it on video, I like to just, you know, do everything I need to show you on one, and then you know that you repeat it on the other, okay? So, this is a basting tape I already had open from the last one of these I made. And what you want to do is, you want to take and fold the top edge of it over. And that way, the top edge of it isn't fraying. You know, it's here to keep you from having frayed edges on your lining. And if it frays, then, well, that's that kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? So I'm going to take it, and I'm just going to slap it right up there on my edge, like so. And then as I sew that same edge, I'm gonna just sew the basting tape right to it. All right? It's not hard, it's not difficult, it's not anything. You can stick it on with double-sided tape if you want, you can hold it on with clips if you want, but I'm just gonna hold it up there as I go, and I'll go slow. And the biggest thing is, I wanna make sure that this stitch line is on the outside of my previous stitch line. Okay, and that way it's in the waist. If you sew it on the inside of it, then once again, you're risking sewing into your fringe and stuff like that. So I want to sew it on the outside of my original stitch line. Okay, and if you want to get super fancy, like I'm using a lighter colored thread, even though this is a dark basting, you could change your thread to match your basting, but I don't care. So we're not going to worry about that. All right. So we're just going to go along and we're going to sew it all together again, except this time we're going to sew that tape to it too. Start out with a back stitch or two. As soon as I can get everything lined up like I need to here. And I use really wide basting tape just because then there's a lot of room for error. You could get a more narrow one. Again, this one's 1/2 inch, and that's pretty big tape for somebody that actually sews for a living. All right, now we go forward. And again, I know that my first seam was pretty far in there, so this one can be further out, and I'm not worried about it. And sometimes it'll sew in, you know, a little fold over in the tape. It takes practice to get it perfect, but if it has a little fold like the one I just sewed in back there, it's not a huge deal. Let's see if we can focus on that. There we go. It's so hard sometimes when you're your own camera guy to make sure that it's always in the shot that it needs to be in, you know? I recently did a video with the tooling video on this one where Lena sometimes held the camera for me, and I know that we got some much better shots then because she moved the camera where it needed to be as opposed to me and my tripod here. All right, now here I'm getting pretty close to the other end. So what I want to do is go ahead and cut my basting, fold it under, and do that again where I, to sew the end in. Okay, and I'm going to stop a little bit short of this area that I can't get to up here. And it's just the nature of the beast of this design, unfortunately, that it'll be that way. But it won't affect anything. Those side pieces are really going to help hide that part of the seam and everything will be fine when it's all put together, I promise. All right, so there's one side. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side now, okay? And when I come back, I don't know why this stitch isn't wanting to complete, so give me a second here. Can't just leave it like that, can I? There we go. All right. So anyway, when I come back, all of this will be done to the other side as well, and we're going to sew the bottom in. So we'll be back. All right, good morning. It's the next day. I was not able to finish this in time yesterday. I thought I could, and I could not. So anyway, we got our sides sewn on, okay, and we got our basting tape to cover our sides, but now we need to sew the bottom on, all right? And this is one of the more difficult parts of this build. Okay, so here I have my bottom. And the very first thing I want to do is just kind of fold it in half, and I want to find my centers of my bottom panel, okay? And this is very important because of how I'm about to do this, okay? So there's my fold. Let me grab a pen, and I'm just going to make a little bitty mark right on the very edge to mark that center. This bottom has some very tight radii curves. And anyway, the edges have very tight curves, and so it can be difficult to clip together and to sew. So to mitigate this, I'm going to use a stapler too. Okay, so I've got my little handy dandy heavy duty stapler. You don't have to do this. The other two that I've built of this, I didn't use a stapler, but I thought I'd show you another little, trick, I guess you could say. So anyway, but the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my very ends where I made my mark are right at the very ends of this thing. And then I'm going to put a staple in place at those ends. And then I'll work all the other edges around and get everything lined up. But if my ends aren't where they need to be, then the bag will end up crooked. That's just how that works. Okay. Now to use the stapler, I'm just going to put a staple at the very, very edge. Okay, I don't want it too far in because I don't want to sew through it. And I don't want it inside of my sew line because then now there's holes. Okay, and also make sure that you're building the bag inside out. So make sure that your grain side is inside of what's the bag right now. And then when we flip it, everything will be right. Okay. But anyway, I want to staple these ends first. If I'm just clipping, I would still just clip the ends first. And then I can work around all the other edges, but that's going to hold that securely. Okay, this is more of a stiff and rigid leather, which is what you need for this bag, because you want this bag to stand up. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and staple those, and then I'm going to work my way around with clips. But in the curves, I'll probably put more staples. But I want to make sure everything's nice and centered before I make everything crazy permanent, you know. So I'm just going to throw a clip right here in the middle here. And I'll throw a clip in the middle down here. And then I'm going to work my way around with my clips until I'm satisfied. And once I'm satisfied, I'm going to put a couple more staples in those ends because these clips are going to pull. And Buddy wants to say hi. I'm sorry. Hello, Buddy. Say hello. No? You just want love? All right. Go. All right. It's hard to get work done around here, you know? All right. So I got those centers kind of marked up there, and now I'm just going to run around here with a couple more clips. And again, it's difficult, especially at first while you're kind of making the leather start to bend and mold to what you want. But then as it does, it falls into place a little bit better for you. So, la-di-da. The very first version of this purse that I'd made, it didn't have flat sides. It was a complete oval all the way around, and it actually had sharper ends, and it was very hard to get around that radius inside the sewing machine. So that's why version 2 has flat sides. It was very nice once it was done. It was just very, very difficult to build. And I'm not trying to put a project out there that everybody's like, screw you, dude, I can't make it, or don't want to make it, or don't want to cuss that much trying to make it, you know, whatever. All right, so we almost got this one side here. And again, I'm just going to clip the entire thing up, and then I'll decide on the very ends where I want to put some staples and make it a little bit more permanent. And yeah. But I don't want to staple anything else until I know that I've got it nice and evenly all the way around and stuff like that. Let me see if I can zoom this in a tiny bit here without being in the way of it. It's kind of hard because this fabric pattern's a little bit camouflagey, if that's a word. All right. Okay. So there we are. I'm going to put just a couple more staples over here in these corners, and then we're going to get to stitching. Okay. And again, you know, these staples are going to be a sewing hazard in a moment too. So we just got to, buddy, don't hit the camera. Come on. Such distraction. They're going to be a sewing hazard also, so we just have to watch where we're putting them. Make sure they're out there on the edge where we want them. when you're forcing this thing under your sewing machine and everything, it looks at on these corners, it will just pop clips out. So the stapler is going to come in handy. And if you've got this skived, you know, kind of thin and everything, just a household stapler would still work, I'm sure, or, you know, regular office supply type stapler. Oop, that staple didn't even get the bottom side. Let me pull it back out right quick. All right, let's do that one again. All right, so there's one end of it stapled up. Okay, I'll put a staple there, 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 and there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other end, and then when I come back, we're going to start sewing this sucker together. All right, got that all stapled up. Now it's time to get to stitching on it, okay? So, steady as she goes on this one, all right? And one thing I've learned when I'm doing one like this is sometimes I'll sew across the flat end down here, and then if it gets really difficult in the corner, I'll skip it. I'll flip it over and I'll sew across the other flat end, and then that holds everything more securely to get into that corner. However, I'm thinking that the staples are going to alleviate that issue, but we'll see, won't we? Let me zoom in a little bit. Sorry. All right. So this is always the hard part. This is the pucker factor right here, okay? So excuse me if you hear me maybe say some bad words under my breath here. Or just straight up out loud, not even under my breath. All right, so this is going to hopefully be one continuous sew line all the way around the inside of this, this gusset piece. So I don't need to back stitch. All right, I'm going to start out going forward, and I'm going to keep going forward. I forgot to mention it yesterday, even though I thought about it several times, but this bag is perfect also for piping. The other ones I have made had piping in them, but we did not include piping in the Project Box kit. But anyway, it is a great candidate for piping. It helps it hold its rigidity and stand up straight. It makes really nice seams, of course, and it's just aesthetically pleasing as well that you could do that piping out of like a maybe the same color as the Fringe or something like that, and it makes it really nice. All right, so I'm sewing along. I'm sure my hand is in the way, and I apologize for that. Pulling clips as I get to them, but like I said, the hard part's going to be getting into this corner here, and we'll just have to see how she goes. Sometimes it just depends on how big your presser foot is, as if you can radius around a corner or not, you know. So what I'll have to do is pick up and rotate the back side of the bag as I sew around it. But right now, those staples are already doing 1,000 times better than my two previous ones of these that I made, where I was depending on the clips. Oof, got real close to that staple though. That's the real danger with the staples, is that, you know, you could end up hitting a staple while you sew, and you could damage your machine. All right, I think we're gonna be okay. We'll see. As an old fella that I look up to says, it either will or it won't. There we go. I reached inside the bag and pushed it out to give it some structure, and that'll help a little bit. Okay, now here I'm at my side seam of my bag, and so it's going to be a little bit difficult to kind of walk that walking foot over it. So sometimes I might lift a little with my knee to help, you know, lift on the presser foot lift. And I don't lift the presser foot off the leather. I just take some of the pressure off of it. I do the same thing if I'm using my Class 26, except then I'll have to take my foot off the treadle, the go pedal. And I use my foot on the presser foot pedal to lift the presser foot, and again I just apply a little bit of pressure to take some pressure off the actual presser foot, and then I'll just use my hand wheel and cycle the machine for a few stitches to get it where I need it to be. So it's okay to do that, but like I said, I don't lift the presser foot completely off the leather, because then the leather will move and I won't have a good stitch line. Get down, buddy. This is not time for a buddy to play on the sewing machine. Get down. Down. Good boy. Normally I sit at a tall chair at my big desk, and so Buddy's like, "Ooh, you're at the low chair. I want to play." Being a shop dog is hard around here. You just get no attention whatsoever. All right, we are almost done with this corner, and that's a beautiful thing. But as I come down here, I've got a little bit of a buckle, a little bit of a bubble, and I don't want to sew that in, so I'm trying to flatten it out before the machine gets to it. All right, great success. If you sew in a bubble, then when you turn the bag right side out, that bubble's not going anywhere. It's still going to be in your bag. Get across the straightaway here. Move the clippies. And here we come into our second corner. So good luck, everybody. The good news is, with that first corner sewn, the bag's actually going to have a tiny bit more rigidity to it. So as you lift it and turn it and rotate it, it actually does a little bit better than it did on the first corner. My presser foot on the side of that staple. That clicking noise is my presser foot climbing on that staple and then falling off of it. That's how close I am to it. So, not exactly smart, but luckily I know how to polish a presser foot if I scratch it. If your presser foot leaves lots of marks on your leather, it might need a good polishing. You'd take some really, take sandpaper and basically sand it smooth again, all the way up to the highest grit paper you can find, and then polish it on your polishing compound like your swivel knife does. And yeah, that'll fix that. I've even had machines that had presser feet with very, very aggressive teeth on them that I've ground down and polished so that I can get a smoother sew out of. So I've had some of those will just want to tear up the leather. All right, it's almost scary how well this has gone, so I'm pretty happy. I know y'all know that feeling that, wait a minute, that was supposed to be harder than that. And so you worry about what didn't happen. All right, I'm back at my original stitch, so I'm just going to do a couple of over stitches to lock it in here. Oh, I thought it was in the same holes as the beginning one, but it wasn't. All right. Awesome. Now, I need to take out those staples, and then I need to use my basting tape to cover up my raw edges of material here. So I'm gonna pause the camera so I can grab my pliers and pull out all these staples and stuff, and then we'll start putting the basting tape on in the same manner that we did the sides. All right, got my staples pulled out, got me a piece of this bias tape cut, and I'm gonna do it the same as the sides, except of course I have to create a joint once it goes all the way around, okay? I have to create a seam, what's the word? Splice, that's the word. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold over this very first end here, just like I did on the side one, and I'm gonna start stitching it on. I'm still on the fence on whether or not it's easier to clip this first. I've clipped it and had difficulties. I've not clipped it and had difficulties. So I still am on the fence on whether or not I think that's the easiest way to do this. So for all intents and purposes here, we are not clipping it. And I've also, I've tried double-sided tape. I've tried all kinds of ways to hold this on here while I start to sew it. And that every way I've done it has its own difficulties, and they've all got their own pros and cons. So anyway, I'm gonna go without here so that everyone can see the struggle. All right. You got to get it even on there because you have to make sure that you're sewing the front and the back of it on, and that's where the real difficult part is. All right, I'm sure my hand is in the way. So anyway, and then when you come to the corner, that's of course the hard part. It always is. But I'm just going to hold it on there and with one hand and rotate the bag with the other hand and hope I can still see and hope you can still see, and all the fun. Sorry, I know you can't see, and I apologize for that. Tell you what, since you can't see what I'm doing anyway, let's just save the video time here. There's no trick to this. There's no easy way. There's no, oh yeah, you just do this right here. It just, you work it on, you sew it on. You work it on, you sew it on, a little bit at a time, and that's how you get it on there. Okay, so that being said, when we come back, we're going to be at the desk and we're gonna sew on those side seams, and we'll turn the bag right side out first and admire our work. We'll sew on the side seams, and yeah, sounds great. See you soon. All right, here we are back at the desk. The machine work is done. Got that basting tape on the bottom there. Big loose hair. Thread, not hair. Got that basting tape on the bottom, and seriously, if anybody's got any tips or tricks on holding that onto that curved surface while you go around it, I'd leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. I'm here to learn just like you guys are. So, got all that done. I'm just gonna make sure everything's nice and clean and pretty. I got some frayed fabric that's already, like the fraying is already outside the basting tape as far as the loose threads and stuff. So I want to clean any of that up that I need to before I turn the bag right side out, because it's a little bit more difficult once it's turned. Okay, now I always take off my watch and stuff while I do this, just so I don't scuff up any leather. On a fringy bag like this, I dump all the fringe out first. And I want to be careful when I'm turning the bag not to pull on the fringe. Okay, if you stretch some of that fringe, it won't be the same length or layers as the others, and then it won't look right. Okay, So you don't want to pull on the fringe, and then you also don't want to pull on that top seam right there because it's not weak, but if it rips the leather right there, then that's a problem. So we're going to reach in, we're going to grab some of the inside here, and we're going to pull it out that way. Okay. Again, this is one of those things. You're not going to like me. I'm sorry. The leather that we sent out for this box is the perfect leather for this bag, but it is not easy to turn. If it were made of something much softer, it would be much easier to turn, but then the bag wouldn't stand up, and that's the ultimate goal. We only have to turn it one time. We have to stand it up all the time. Okay? So I'm just trying to grab a handful of it and pull it through. I definitely struggled when I did the last one of these as well, and that one even had piping, making it even harder to turn. But anyway, we can get this. All my dadgum fringe went back inside, so that creates bulk. I want it outside. There we go. Okay, got her where I can flip it. There we go. Once you get to where you can flip these top parts, that's a major win, because then it's just like stuff in a sack. There we go. All right, now I just gotta, fringe sure makes things complicated. I know, everybody thinks it looks nice. And it does look nice. I'm just not a fan of it, but I also don't carry purses, so, you know, give the people what they want. Get in there. Okay, and then once we get to this point, just got to push out those bottoms like so. Oh, whew. Thought I had me a bad stitch line there. I was like, what in the world? But it was just some leather fibers that were sticking to it. So. All right, and then just like any other bag I make, I'll take and fold my edges down, get them nice and crisp. Whew. Tell you what, you have earned a cup of coffee. All right, and then there's the clasp. It clasps. Right now it's a little difficult because this is flat. Once these sides are sewn the way they need to be sewn, then the purse will have a very rigid and round shape to it. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do now. I am going to take, and I'm gonna punch or use an awl and poke a couple of holes right here in the top and then kind of towards the middle of this, this top area. And I'm just gonna run a thread through there to hold that nice and tight while I do the hand sewing that I have to do in that area, okay? And if you do this, it's way easier than struggling with holding all this crap together the whole time that you're trying to sew it, okay? Trust me. So give me just a second to grab the stuff I need to start hand sewing, and I've got my other pieces here, and then I'll zoom the camera in appropriately, and we'll get this going. All right, so here we are. I'm trying to do this in a manner that you can see it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take an awl and I'm gonna just poke a hole within the original stitch line there, okay? I don't want it on the outside of the original stitch line because then it'll be seen on our final product and we don't want that. And I'm just gonna poke one hole on each side. Very much right across from each other. There we go. And I'll grab me a couple of hand sewing needles here. And I'm just gonna do a real quick whip stitch to put some thread in that hole. And then tie it. And again, this is just holding these two pieces together so that I can attach the piece that actually holds these two pieces together. All right, I know that sounds silly, but trust me, it helps. And I'll just tie a knot in this. Matter of fact, I may whip it through there one or two more times. Woo, nearly knocked my coffee over now. I'd have just gone back to bed. I'll go ahead and run this through here one more time so it holds it a little bit more secure while I tie my knot and I can get everything good and tight. There we go. And then I want these two pieces butted up to each other, okay? If I butt it up to each other, it'll be much easier to sew than if they're bent and at an angle of each other. Okay, so there's half a knot. And a half a knot to make a whole knot. All right, got that tied. Let me cut my excess off here. Now, there's a couple of different ways we can do what we need to do next. First and foremost, okay, these are the pieces I marked number 1. This is the end piece that I marked number 1. Okay, and I'm going to take a couple of sewing needles. Bag doesn't want to stand up just yet. But I'm going to take a couple of sewing needles and I'm going to use them to kind of hold this thing in place. Okay, so I'm going to put them in my predetermined stitch holes here. That bottom one's not through all the layers because we sewed the bottom part on. Not a problem. And I'm not sure what I've done that I got glue all over my awl, but that sure makes it difficult to use. Who knows what project that was part of. Okay, so I'm just getting those stitch holes cleared out so that I can use them. Okay. So again, I've got my piece number 1 here that I marked, and I've got my piece number 1 here, and I'm going to take and just use these needles to kind of hold this into position for my first couple of stitches. Now, do not forget that this D-ring needs to be on here, okay? If you forget your D-ring, then you'll get it all nice and sewn up and then realize that, nope, now you got to cut all those stitches out and redo it because your D-ring needs to be on it. Don't forget your D-ring. I'm going to set it down for just a minute, though, because it keeps getting in my way here. There we go. All right, and then that double-sided tape is still on the back of these, so that helps a little bit. Now, I'll put my D-ring back on it, fold it over to its appropriate position, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the top parts of the stitches. Stick that needle through and put it through all the layers, all the way to the inside. I say all the way to the inside. Come on, buddy. Don't make a fool of me on camera. I'm doing a good enough job of that on my own. All right. Now, I'm going to start over on this other side here, this second side, and I'm simply going to hand stitch it all the way down. Okay, when I run out of that inside piece, you make sure that all of your stitches go through all the layers. They need to go through this layer, and the piece that folded over onto the inside. Once I'm off of the bottom of that inside piece, I'll just keep going down and, you know, and then it'll just be stitching this piece to this piece, and that's fine. When I get to the bottom, I'm going to do my little back stitches, and we'll call that done. Then I got to come over here and do the exact same thing. Then I got to turn it around and do the other side of the bag. So I've done lots of videos on hand stitching, and there's lots of other videos on hand stitching that are on other channels and stuff. But I'm not going to make you watch me do this for probably the next hour that it's going to take me to stitch this up. It is a little bit difficult until you get the first few stitches in, and then that holds everything in position and holds your D-ring up and out of the way and stuff like that. And then after that, it's just smooth sailing, and you're just stitching on down. All right? So good luck with it, and we'll be back. All right, folks, so there it is. We got our ends sewn on. Okay, they look good. We didn't forget our D-rings, so that's awesome. All right, now if you notice the top of your bag is pretty round, you just got to squish it down and latch it and leave it that way for a day or two. And I also usually will stuff a couple of towels in there very tightly to make sure that the leather's kind of trained to stand up like it should. All right. So yeah, and then your fringe, depending on what kind of leather you're using, your fringe might look a little rough right now, but if you leave it standing up or hanging for a couple of days, it'll straighten out and even and be very presentable and pretty within a day or two. So it'll relax. So I hope you enjoyed this project. The shoulder strap, you can do any kind of shoulder strap you want on this. We did send out a strap and a couple of swivel hook snaps. You can rivet or sew those on the ends just easy as can be, and kind of do it to fit. I've talked several times on other videos about purse straps and bag straps are not something I try to second guess because everyone is very different on that. You know, when Janie Sue, when I make a bag, I just have her, for her, you know, I just have her hold it where she wants it, and then I measure the shoulder strap to her, and then that's how long the strap ends up being. But everybody's very different. Some people want to cross sling it, some people want to hang it over one shoulder, some people want it really tight up under their armpit, some people want it hanging way low. Your guess is as good as mine on that. So it's always best if you're making it specifically for somebody to measure that out. And then if you're doing it for, you know, something to set on your table at if you do events and fairs and stuff like that, then maybe just take a poll of people you know and, hey, how would you want this? And kind of split the difference on that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this project. Again, this is the Classy Fringe purse, and yeah, it's not hard to make, but it's definitely not the easiest bag we've ever done either. So hopefully we all learned something, and hopefully you all have a great project. And until next time, I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply. Hope you have a great day.